Perfect. Thank you
Right.
so much for joining us live on the recording for the International Euphonium Summit. I'm the host, Nicholas Haffter von Heide, Farm for Dreams. You can check us out at farmfordreams.com for the first ever International Euphonium Summit. And to be honest, I didn't know it was going to grow this big, this fast. Going from just regular Euphonium Summit and virtual to now we're into the international waters, global, and we have an amazing guest with us today. Please welcome Dr. Ian Lester. I'll go over your bio in just a second. I'll let you say hi.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. I am super excited to be here. I was talking to Nicholas earlier, but this is such a cool project. And I am, again, more than happy to be helping out with this and just talking about my whole musical self.
What's really fun, what's really ironic is I used to live in Michigan in the St. Joe Bering Springs area. I don't know if
Oh,
you're
yeah.
familiar with that.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome.
That
Yeah,
that
Michigan's such a great state.
It is. That wasn't covered in the transcripts. I believe we have in our transcripts for those that haven't gotten the transcripts or purchased a hardcover copy at some point in the future. That's almost an hour of conversation in transcripts before this, before I hit record for the video here. Just to give you all a reference of how amazing this summit has turned out to be. There's some really gold content there. So with further ado, Dr. Ian Lester is a native Michigander whose music has been described as high energy, innovative, and very thoughtful with concise and precision. I did add a word there. International Tuba-Euphonium Association provided that quote, and it's a really awesome organization. If this is the first interview or transcription you've read, get to know that organization. Such an impact. Wow. Dr. Ian Lester, born 1984, is an
90,
award
94.
94. Did I say
Yeah,
84? I meant
you did.
94.
It's okay.
I can go over the otter. It must be my Michigan accent on my Texas. Is an award-winning composer, euphonium player, and teacher, holding a doctorate degree in euphonium performance, a master's degree in composition from the University of Missouri at Kansas City, where he previously received his master's degree as well in euphonium performance. Two master's degrees, y'all.
Yep.
That's a dedicated lifetime learner there.
Yes.
Ian received his bachelor's degree in euphonium performance and pursued additional compositional studies at Oakland University in the home state of, no, not California, Michigan.
Yep. Had a lot of people go, "Oh, Oakland, California." Nope,
Uh,
different Oakland.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, Ian's works have been performed, recorded by soloists, chamber ensembles, wind bands, and brass bands at venues such as Carnegie Hall, Fort Myer, and many universities and recital halls around the globe. Really, y'all, it's truly amazing to interview these amazing artists and composers. Geeking out here, sorry. Notable achievements include winning the 2016 U.S. Army Band Tuba-Euphonium Composition Competition, receiving the 2018 Oakland University's Outstanding Student Composition Award. So if you're into composition and you don't know where to really go into, we might cover it actually on this interview. And it's not in California, so be ready for cold weather. Um, the 20 let's see, winning the 2018 North Texas Euphonium Quartet Composition Competition, the 2021 Mirari Brass Quintet Call for
Yep.
scores, and the 2022 UMKC composition competition. Say that 10 times
Yeah,
fast.
tongue twisters.
Right? Do you have your students working on that tongue twister, by the way?
Yeah, and I myself am always working on it when I have to say composition competition. It's
That's
always
awesome.
tricky. Yeah.
Also being selected to attend the 2021 Julia String Quartet Emerge Solstice Composition Workshop, along with winning both the inaugural 2023 North Texas ITEA, that stands for what?
International
No,
Tuba-Euphonium
yeah,
Association.
I was gonna quiz the
Oh
people
no.
below, but that's okay. Give them the answer. I mean, that's what we're all here about right now on this International Euphonium Summit, providing the answer key to life.
Yeah.
It really is with what we're doing. Holy smokes! Can you imagine this kind of content for maybe your master's classes that they gave you this kind of a key to, hey, here's the answer key. Now go do life. So the North Texas ITEA chapter composition competition and the 2023 ITEA R. Winston Morris Award for Excellence in Tuba-Euphonium Ensemble Competition. Everybody, welcome Dr. Ian Lester.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I have to hydrate after all that
I don't blame you.
with coffee too.
Yeah.
So, man, wow, what a treat, y'all. Every single interview, every single participant within this particular International Euphonium Summit or the years to come, boy, howdy, y'all are spoiled. I don't know if you all understand the gravity and the wow, wow. So I want to dive in. You're not only a composer but a euphonium artist, and as I'm diving into this even further as a professional euphonium player myself, or have been years back, is I never considered a duality, a dual purpose, a dual identity, duality between composer, artist, with before this, all this amazing exploration, all this research, and getting to reach out to artists, composers, conductors, geeking out with you. When did you start playing euphonium?
Yeah, so my euphonium journey began all the way back in fifth grade. We had it luckily, fifth grade. At my elementary school, we were lucky to have euphonium as a starting instrument.
Not baritone.
Correct. It was actually like a student euphonium, wasn't a baritone.
Are you talking about the the Yamaha 321?
Yeah, it was the top 4-valved Yamaha.
Yeah.
Yep. So we had that in fifth grade. I was extremely lucky.
Spoiled.
Yeah, I believe I remember trying out violin, and like the guy who was, in charge of letting the students try out the violin got angry for some reason. He said, "Go try that thing." And I went to try it and made a sound, and it was euphonium. They were like, "Yep, this is the one for you." Wasn't a good sound, but it was a sound. So started euphonium in fifth grade. As I went into middle school, I picked up trombone as well. Continued euphonium. Started taking private lessons, I think freshman year of high school, on euphonium. Continued trombone. As I was taking lessons throughout high school, I was getting better and better. And we'll get more into this later, but there was a camp I went to between my junior and senior year of high school called the Music for All Summer Symposium. And that was really the turning point of when I knew I wanted to do it as a potential career. We can talk more about that in a bit. But yeah, ever since I've just been like, riding the euphonium wave. I really started taking the music and euphonium seriously during a little bit before that camp. But when that camp happened, I was like, okay, I really want to, double down on this and make it my life.
So let's with the same respect, composition. Yeah. When did composition come into that right there?
Yeah, great question. I would say senior year of high school, I was writing. I didn't have any software except for Noteflight, just a website at that time on my computer. It's a free music notation software. It's okay. There's MuseScore, I would say, is the best free software. But at the time it was there was Noteflight. It was just a website at the time, not even a software. And I would be in the back of math class with a staff paper, just writing down melodies that I had no idea what they sounded like. I have okay relative pitch. I don't have perfect pitch. I wasn't hearing them in my head and writing them down. I was just writing down these melodies. Then I'd go back home, put them in Noteflight, and they would sound terrible. But I tweak them a little bit, and I got really hooked on writing melodies first and foremost. And I think that actually still comes through in my music. My music is really melodically based and a lot of tonal stuff, but really melody drives a lot of my music. But yeah, 18th birthday, I got the music notation software Sibelius. My parents gave me that. They really saw my interest in composition. And to go on a side tangent, they've always been super supportive of my musical endeavors.
So when you
And
brought home the euphonium first in fifth
yep,
grade, what'd they think? What'd they
you
say?
know, I'm sure they had no idea what it was. Because none of my family was, musically inclined or involved. My mom was in the church choir, but she didn't read music. She would use a tape recorder and record rehearsals and like listen to it and sing by ear, which now that I think back is such a more complicated way. But I was the first one to really dive into music in my immediate family. But they were supportive. Like when I graduated high school, I my graduation present was a Best in Prestige euphonium, which is the one I still use to this day. um Really, it was one of the best gifts I've ever gotten, if not the best gift. But um they got me Sibelius for my 18th birthday, and that really opened the door to my compositional life.
So going back over to the euphonium side and around your music for all music
Yes.
symposium. Let's pick the trail back up there.
Yeah. Yeah. So this was like the turning point in my life. I believe when I before this camp, I was gonna go follow my family's footsteps and go into nursing. I had a ton,
Wow.
almost all my family was or is in the medical field in some way. And my mom was a nurse for like 40 plus years.
Wow.
And I've always felt like I'm like a helper, kind helping person. I was like, this would be great for me. And I was, taking med skills classes in my high school, getting ready to become a nurse. Actually applied to a few colleges at that point. Um, but between my junior and senior year, I got a scholarship from my school's band program. It was the Norm Logan scholarship to go to this camp. And Norm Logan, one of my still good friends and a great mentor who I played with in a community band back in Farmington, Michigan, where I went to high school. He was a former band director at my high school, and he created the scholarship to send one student per year to this camp to go into the concert band track at the camp. There's like a marching band track, color guard, orchestra track. I went into the concert band track. And once you get there, you audition to be placed in one of the bands in the concert band track. I was very lucky to not get super nervous and played well in the audition. I placed in the top band. And you know, we had rehearsals multiple times a day, throughout most of the day for a full week, and a lot of like team building, leadership exercises and games too. But the thing was, this was the first time I had been with a group of people in a band or an ensemble who every single student there was so dedicated to the music and was there because they loved what they were doing. Um, and just rehearsing with that group, we had guest conductors, we built up the rep. It was such a great experience. And then the cumulative concert at the end of the week. This was at Ball State University, this camp. I think it still is. It was in their, great music hall. My mom was in the audience, and it was just that concert was the feeling of pride and joy, and you know, knowing that I was a part of this, and it just felt so great. And I think that's the thing about music you don't find anywhere else, is you feel emotions that, like I think it was Bernstein said, music speaks when words fail. In this case, it's like, nothing else replicates the emotions you feel in that kind of scenario when you're playing. And it's either, whether it be an amazing quality performance or just, you're putting your heart and soul into the music. So I knew at that point, like during that concert, I was like, I want to feel this feeling again. That's the only concert I've ever cried while I was playing too. It was like
That's awesome.
emotional. Yeah. I was like, I want to feel this feeling again. And if I ever become a teacher, I want my students to be able to feel this too. So at that moment, I knew I wanted to somehow pursue euphonium playing and or teaching. I didn't know how to do that at that point, but I was like, you know what? I definitely want to go to college for music at this point. So yeah, I disregarded I got acceptance letters from nursing. from some big schools because they're like, oh, a male nurse, we need those. And it's like, sorry, I need to follow my heart. And I applied to several schools for euphonium performance, and I ended up choosing Oakland University, which we can talk more about it. But I think that was also one of the best choices I've made, was to go to Oakland.
So first,
Yeah,
did you ever have you ever expressed um, these same emotions, this same experience to Norm, since you're friends with him still? Did you
I
let him
haven't.
know?
I need to. I need to. That
Which
is a
is
great
great.
point.
So you can send him this recording
I will.
when he
Norm,
goes.
yeah, Norm, we're gonna send you this, and I want you to know that your scholarship was honestly probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. So I'll tell him in person too. I'll see him again. I'm visiting Michigan later this summer, and if I run into him, he'll definitely uh, be made aware of the impact he's made on me.
Would be a really awesome thing, and since there's a scholarship after him,
Yeah.
instead not instead but instead of him, um,
Mhm.
I would it would be an honor to get to interview him for the
Yeah.
International Euphonium Summit. Do you know what his instrument is?
Yes, he is a trombone player. Main instrument's trombone, so low brass people unite.
Yeah.
Um, he also conducts a lot. Like I said, he was the former band director at my high school, but such an amazing guy. I remember I asked him, like, I have some trombone students. Do you have any good warm-ups like you'd suggest for trombone students? And he gave me this whole packet of like these amazing warm-ups he developed and collected from other sources. I mean, he's really been an inspiration, and I haven't expressed enough to him, how much he has been.
Wow, what gold then
Yeah.
for this interview to be able to be that kind of segue into showing the appreciation. And I want to
Yeah.
share that same sentiment as I have in other previous interviews and future interviews for that matter, is the parents and those
Mm.
that are involved in someone's life. You don't know the impact that you really have. Um, or that you're going to have in someone's life.
Mhm.
You're not the first one to say that.
Yeah.
In a way, fortunately, but unfortunately as well, because a lot of times we pass these moments and take those moments for granted that we don't reach out and say, hey, man, it really, or hey, mom, hey, dad, or, those moments that were critical in our light bulb moment, or
Mm.
that special, like, aha, or,
Yep.
it really does matter. Um, it really does matter to those. I mean, we'll eventually get to know the impact that we make, or maybe not.
Yeah.
Um, and for someone that needs to hear this right now, that's going through this, whatever it may be, share your impact. Share that aha moment with your teacher, with whoever made that big impact. I implore you, I ask, I beg you to reach out to that person who made that difference in your life, that made um, that brought you to that bridging point of that decision made my life where it is today for good, and it's impacting tens of hundreds, thousands elsewhere, but it's because of you. And Norm, Logan, thank you so much for being so willing, and wow, what a legacy. I
Yeah.
can't wait for him to hear this interview and see that authenticity that was captured on camera. Uh,
Yeah.
there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
What I'm curious, when your parents, both in the medical field,
Hmm.
knew that you had both applied for music and nursing medical field.
Yeah.
When you turned down, did you let them know that you turned down those programs, or did you just say, I accepted this program at Oakland?
Yeah. So if I'm remembering correctly, so my mom, and I have two moms. So my mom and my stepmom, my mother, my birth mom, was a nurse with postpartum, parents after just liver babies. Stepmom, I think I don't know the exact title, but it's like blood lab specialist in a hospital, and works with tech too. But they both, stepmom was a little more hesitant about the whole music thing. Like, are you going to be able to get money out of this? Will it be a career? The big question, everyone asks about music in general, but especially euphonium. Um,
Yeah.
right. So, but my birth mom, Denise, both of them have been so supportive my whole life, but my birth mom Denise has always been my number one fan, and she instantly was like, this is what your heart's telling you, go for it. And
Wow.
I think she had seen my progress and my dedication in the lessons she would drive me to during high school every week. And my first private lesson teacher, Glenn Anderson, he unfortunately passed away several years ago, but he was my first, like, really main teacher that I studied with for a long time, who made a difference. He also encouraged me. My band director in high school, Michael Steele, at Farmington High School, another one of my biggest inspirations and biggest advocates for me to, be successful in music. Even my middle school band director, Rob Wilson, he's the one who taught me to take music seriously and start learning how to read music. But yeah, my parents, though, were not too, they didn't, I don't think they were too put down or anything when I decided, I want to do music instead of this plan of doing medicine. Again, my stepmom was a little worried, but I think the dedication that I was showing and my drive was enough to sort of put those worries to rest a little bit. And she's at least like, okay, let's see how he does. And they, yeah, in general, they were really supportive.
So going back to the composition side, since
Yes.
we're so privileged to have you on, is when did you first have an idea to write a note down in starting your composition?
Yeah. So again, like, the first, memories I really have of writing my own music were through the sketch pad in, math class. And I remember in high school there was a music theory extracurricular class you could take.
Wow.
I never had room in my schedule for it, and I wanted to take it. And I would see, the students in the music wing on these keyboards, like writing music through MIDI keyboards, and I was so jealous. And yeah, and I remember asking my band director, Michael Steele, if I could sneak in there after school and, like, work in the lab, and he was like, "Of course." So
Oh, what? Really?
yeah. So he would, he locked the door for me, and I'd use Note Flight or whatever it is on there. So sometimes I'd just be at home, but sometimes I was able to do this. And that really, along with getting Sibelius later that year and just working with this MIDI keyboard for the first time, we're like, oh, you can play this piano and then inputs notes into the computer. It
Okay,
was
so for the beginner artists and the
Mhm.
parents that are watching, can you break down like what is a MIDI
Yeah.
keyboard?
So a MIDI keyboard or a MIDI controller is basically, I can actually show you right here. Let me unplug it. Mine's a small one, but it can be large, it can be a small keyboard, that you plug into your computer or laptop. It basically controls the input of notes, so you don't have to go with, like, point and click on a mouse or a regular keyboard on a computer, and it makes it so much easier. I'll be the first to admit I am horrible at playing piano. Don't tell my keyboarding techniques teacher that from Oakland. She's also been a big supporter of me throughout the years, but you don't have to be super proficient at piano to, input, notes into a software. Um, yeah, you just use that keyboard and whatever software you want. There's things called DAWs, which are digital audio workstations.
Mhm.
There's a variety of them, but you can use them to really start writing music. Um, the one I use for my acoustic music, the non-electronic stuff, is the Sibelius software I was talking about. So
Do you use
yeah,
GarageBand by chance?
I only have the only Apple product I have is an iPad, and I know I can do GarageBand and iPad, but I'm have all PC and, Windows and stuff. I think GarageBand is an Apple thing.
I think so,
Um,
but I'm not certain if they've crossed over and made
they
a
might have by
license.
now, but I don't use that. I used it like briefly at Oakland's composition lab. They had that on their Macs, but I never used it like seriously. But I know it is a good program.
Yeah.
If you have an Apple product, it's one of the go-tos.
Hmm. So, when you were going through your bachelor's degree
Mhm.
program, how soon after did you want to dive into your master's programs?
Yeah, so honestly, like one of the most both turbulent but also self-inspirational times of my life was during undergrad. Um, when
Wow.
I started my bachelor's degree, I was not ready to live on my own in the dorms. Like mentally, I wasn't there, wasn't mature enough, and I was so easily distracted. And at that time, I had undiagnosed sleep apnea, so those 8 a.m. theory classes were
Not going to
like
happen.
pardon my language, hell on earth. Um, where I was falling asleep in class and it just appeared that I was being lazy and I didn't know what was wrong at the time. I thought I was just tired, even though I was getting, 10, 12 hours of sleep. And that affects you through the day too. So anyway, the first few years, I went from, the starting top GPA when you enter and you have a 4.0 or whatever. By year two, midway through, I was at 1.9. I had
Wow.
like failed almost all of my classes. I
Were
had
you on
lost.
scholarship?
I was, and I was on a housing grant, which paid for full housing and a full talent-based scholarship, no, sorry, full academic scholarship and partial talent-based. When I left high school, I had a GPA of like 3.7 or something. But my parents, kept me on track. I was living with them and they didn't like do my homework for me, but they always reminded me to do my homework. And all of a sudden when I'm alone, it was like a nightmare. And I lost all of my scholarship, all my housing grant, had to move back in with my parents. They had to take out like those parent plus loans and ton of loans. And most of my student loans that I have accumulated are from the last several years or few years of my undergrad. Um, but year three, I was contemplating dropping out. I was like, this can't be for me, even though I really love music and like this is what I thought my life should be. I can't keep up with the academic stuff. And I think the turning point was a combination of sort of like this meltdown, not meltdown, but like, I was sobbing in my car alone. It was like raining and sort of like classic sad setting. It was dark and raining and I was just crying. I just knew like, unless I get my stuff together and accept that I need help from others, um, then I'm screwed. Because I had always been one of those people who thinks they can fix everything themselves. And I think one of the most important things I've learned musically and non-musically is it's okay to need help and to get help. And don't think that you need to do everything by yourself. So that sort of was a turning point. And then actually the next day, my professor, Dr. Ken Kreshe, professor of low brass at Oakland, again, one of my biggest inspirations and most important mentors in my life, called me into his office for what I thought was a lesson. It was him and the head of the theory department sitting there.
Oh
And I
boy.
was like, oh, this is going to be bad. And what I thought was going to be a stern talking to and like, you need to drop out type of thing was them being there for me. And, what can we do to help you like succeed? And they were there for
Wow.
me. Yeah. Um, that was, I think, my favorite part of Oakland was how supportive everyone is there, whether it's faculty, students. They like even this kid who appeared to be lazy, falling asleep in class, like they knew, something was up and they wanted to help. And they got me into tutoring, which combination of their help with the tutoring and just being there for me, and me dedicating myself to becoming more organized and more on top of things really like gave me a 180. And from that point on, I got all A's in all of my classes.
Wow.
And the thing was, so what was supposed to be your 4-year program altogether ended up being 6 years,
Not
um,
including the masters.
not including the master's, because my bachelor's, I started as a performance and ed double major. And after year two, I was called into, I think it was the dean's office, and they explained to me that because I kept failing all the music theory classes and keyboarding classes, I was not able to progress in my ed classes. You needed to pass all the, I think, keyboarding classes to
Yeah.
keep going in the ed classes. So they were like, if you want to keep the ed degree, you're going to be here for 8 years, and your financial aid will run out after 6. Um, they'd recommended that I dropped one or the other. At that point, the last ed class I took was observing 5th grade classes, and I had taken all the instrumental techniques classes, so it's pretty far in that degree. But I realized, I think, like, out of the two, I wanted to pursue the performance degree. Um, so I dropped the ed degree.
No,
But
that's I want to tangent
yeah,
or kind of bring a note. Did you realize that you started band in 5th grade and you went back to 5th grade to
right.
that's really for me listening to your story and your journey.
Mhm.
That sounds like it's that portion right there was almost serendipitous.
Yeah. I almost picture it as like a full circle moment. And even though I decided that, music education degree wasn't the path I wanted, I do feel like jumping forward to now. I'm teaching a lot of students at the middle school level right now, as a low brass coach for a lot of 6th graders who have just started euphonium and tuba. And we can talk more about it later, but like just being able to teach them, knowing they're in the spot I was in, as a young student who's just so excited to like learn this instrument. And it's just a great spot to be in for me, just knowing that I can influence these young kids in the way that I am. And yeah, but I mean, jumping back to the whole, when did I
Sure.
just
Yeah.
I want to do the
Absolutely.
master's degree, um as I started doing that 180, trying to really be on top of things. I went to sleep study, got the CPAP, sort of with my psychiatrist, messed with some of the medications I had been on since I was a kid, increased some dosages, that and the tutoring, and just, really, honestly, the hardest I've ever worked at anything was the last 3 years of my undergrad.
You know,
Um,
I want to stop you and say thank you
yeah.
so much for your vulnerability.
Oh, of course.
No, it really is. It brings the. I mean, this whole interview, it brings with every single one that's contributed this
Yeah.
authenticity that we see, and to know that you're not the only one. That yeah, to reach out and to ask from ask help from someone,
Hmm.
from your teacher, from your counselor, from someone that you think that may or may may or may not be there for you, but you won't know unless you ask. Your vulnerability, Dr. Lester, it's just it's really it's 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 really rich. It's really authentic, and I want to share how much that's appreciated. Just you being vulnerable on this recording, in the notes that you'll read, or even from when you eventually share this with Norm Logan, uh,
Yeah.
and everyone that's impacted your life, to see your journey that
Hmm.
hadn't known your
Yeah.
backstory at all. I can imagine all the light bulbs going off. Oh,
Right.
that's what.
Yeah, because like I think one of the big things is, like, even some of the really successful people out there, like, we're all human. Like, no one is perfect. Not a lot of people had like a really easy ride up to where they are. And yeah, it's like, I think being open, for me, being open about my experiences and my life has been really valuable, because it's like there's so many other kids in my shoes who are, could be debating, should I drop out because I'm failing all my classes, or college is really hard. I was not expecting this. Like, you know, I'm just happy to be able to provide at least some kind of reassurance and comfort for those who are struggling. Because yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and ADHD, and for a while during my undergrad, that was really affecting me. And it was because, the freshman 15, they call it, when you gain like weight from just, freshman year. I got more like the freshman 50. It was, I lived right by the dorm cafeteria, and it was open all the time, and I overate. And I think what happened was the sudden weight gain made the medication dosage not effective. So I was really struggling. But going back to that, reversal, where I really dug deep mentally to, make things right. And my professor, I remember him telling me, because I expressed interest early on that I wanted to, pursue euphonium as a career. And he told me, this is like the first year of undergrad. He's like, all right, well, you'll probably need, to go to grad school then if you want to pursue euphonium as a career. So, and he said you need a 3.0 to enter into a master's program as a GPA. Cue me beginning of third year, I'm at like 2.1. I climbed up a little bit. I did the math. I would need at least like a 3.7, or like an A minus in every class until I graduate to get like a 3.01. It was like I would be right on the edge of being able to get into
Wow.
grad school or not. And
By the proverbial skin on your teeth.
yeah, and I knew, I was like, okay, I am going to have to work harder than I've worked in my entire life to make it into a master's program. And in fact, when I was in my sixth and final year of undergrad, I was at a 2.99 when it was time to audition for grad schools. And I
Oh
had
wow.
like one semester of grades left. If I would, at that point, it was like, if I got what I thought I was going to get, I'd graduate with a 3.16. And I had a little wiggle room. So like I could get 1B and I would still get passed, but I had to, each professor I auditioned for, I had to tell them, I don't have a 3.0 right now, but like if you look at my transcripts, you'll see that I've been making like extreme steady progress the past 3 years. And I almost guarantee you I will have a 3.0 by the time I graduate. They all were fine with it. I auditioned at multiple schools, they all trusted me. But the one I ended up going to was with Tom Stein at UMKC. And he was honest, he's one of the most genuine humans I've ever met and one of the best teachers. But I remember knowing after I went to a lesson with him before auditions, I made sure to drive to take lessons with all the professors. I think that's an important thing for incoming college students and grad students to do, is go take a lesson with the professor before you audition, or
Or even yet, especially now, we get
with
this
Zoom.
awesome thing with the
Yep.
summit.
Yeah, this too. And like I have a friend who's trying to do DMA trombone stuff, and he's taking a lot of Zoom lessons, which are great too. The thing is, just get to know the professor before you go to audition, because it's like having that interaction and personal connection before you go to audition, such a big advantage that not enough people take advantage of.
Absolutely.
Um, and if you're gonna, you have a better idea if you're gonna mesh with that professor or not.
Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, so I auditioned, or had lessons with each one. I liked everyone, and but really Tom stuck out as like this hidden gem that I didn't know about before I auditioned. I actually had no idea what UMKC was, where it was, until Ken Kresge at Oakland told me like last minute. I had already auditioned at like Tennessee, Knoxville, Illinois, other places. Like, you need to add UMKC to your list. They have a GTA spot open. I was like, I don't know where that is. And I applied and had the lesson with Tom, and I was like, this has to be the place. If I get this GTA spot, I'm definitely going here. And he called me up after my audition, after I went back home to Michigan. And he's like, "Do you want the spot?" And I was like, "Oh, definitely, yeah."
On your way back home.
No, sorry, it was already when I got back, and I was
Oh,
I was waiting for a bit. There was that time frame, like I'll call you during this time, and it was
right.
the waiting. Um, but the audition was interesting because the lesson I played for him a lot. The audition, I played the first like three notes of the Horowitz, and he's like, "All right, stop playing. Let's talk." And we just chatted the rest of the audition, and because he had heard me play in the lesson, and he wanted to know how I was. Like, when I look back on it, I know now that he wanted to know how I was as a person, a learner, and how I would mesh with the rest of the studio.
Mhm.
Um, and again, one of my favorite things about Tom was he's one of the best people readers. There's not one person who has been in our studio at UMKC who I have found was a mean person, or damaging in any way to the studio atmosphere. We're all so supportive of each other. Um, the conservatory as a whole there is like that. But he was,
Wow.
I think, more keen on having someone in the studio who would work well with others and be a better learner than someone who's just talented and a great player. And I'll admit, like, my lesson. I played okay. I don't think I played enough to beat out everyone for a TA spot, but I think he saw in me a good learner and good person. And like okay player, but with potential. So, but yeah, as I studied with him, I grew so much as a musician and person. And but yeah, it was really the third year of my undergrad is when I realized, I want to go to grad school, for sure, but I just need to work my butt off to get to the point where I can go.
So you went to UMKC first as a UFR
Yes.
performance and then composition. Why you didn't do it concurrently? You did it one right after
Yeah.
another.
So here's the thing. I wanted to apply for composition and youth at the same time. Like I didn't know how to do it, but I looked it up.
This is
You had to have
before you got your TA spot. You
so
thought that.
yes, before I got the TA spot and before I decided on just euphonium, I was interested in doing composition right after undergrad because by the time I was done with undergrad, I had won that Pershing's own composition competition, and I think I won the North Texas Euphonium Quartet like the summer of, between schools. But anyway, I thought I was doing enough with composition where I wanted to major in it as well as euphonium. The thing was, at most schools, you needed a certain amount of live recordings of your works. And at that point, I had one. It was actually, I didn't have it. The premiere of that tuba sonata that won the Pershing Zone competition wasn't recorded. It was just premiered live. I'm sure it was recorded, but I never got a copy. So I had no live recordings, and I tried to send in, MIDI files of my works with the
Uh-huh.
PDF scores, but they're like, oh, you need live recordings. So that was the reason I couldn't enter into a composition program in 2018 to
Ah,
2019 because no live recordings. I had a lot of works written, not a lot, but some, but just no live recordings yet. And um, I should have taken advantage of that more at Oakland. There were opportunities to get my works played. We had this thing called Arts at Noon, where every week there'd be a noon recital where like people could like have pieces played, blah blah, perform their own works, other people's works.
and that's recorded.
Um, yes, you can get it recorded. Actually, my first composition teacher at Oakland, who I took lessons with, Terry Harold, I believe he still is. He's the whole sound guy at Oakland. He takes care of like recording everything. So I definitely could have gotten hooked up with some good recordings from that. But I actually took while I was doing my master's in euphonium, I, I emailed some of the composition faculty at UMKC, wanted to introduce myself, let them know like I was there and that I was interested in composition. I asked if I could take lessons on the side, but they were obviously like really busy with the whole studios and stuff of the composition studios. But I took that time during my master's to get some of my pieces recorded. I won a few more competitions, which resulted in recordings. I had the In Modus Tuba Quartet, which is Chris Dickey, Genevieve Clarkston, AJ Miller, and Sarah Miller, up on I think the Northeast coast. I don't know if they're all located up there, but
I think
they
Genevieve's
recorded.
over at OK State now.
Okay, yeah, and then Chris is at Washington, one of the schools in Washington, I think.
I think so.
Um, but yeah, so they had a quartet. I think they still do when it gets
I think
together.
so.
But they recorded one of my works on their Halloween CD. So I had that, and then I had a few competition recordings. So I applied at the end of my master's degree in euphonium for the composition degree, as well as a DMA in euphonium. Um,
Hold on,
and
hold on. Wait, what? So you had you had already completed your master's in euphonium performance,
yep,
and then you went back for a dual and a master's in composition as well as a doctorate in euphonium at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah, it was insane. And when you think about like, here's this kid who had a 1.9, maybe like 6 years ago, who was struggling his butt off, and now here's this guy who's really determined to give it his all and do well. It was crazy how far I had come in that time, and I was confident. Like by that time, I was so confident that I could do it, and I'm glad I did. I talked to my academic advisor before, picking that I wanted to do a DMA in euphonium and composition masters. And I immediately asked her, I was like, will this be like really hard? And she's like, we can spread it out a little bit to where it takes 4 years to complete both at the same time. You can, do the 3-year track where you'll just have a little more heavy course load. And I decided I was going to do the 3-year track, mostly because a lot of my friends were going to graduate in 3 years and I wanted to graduate with them.
Yeah, that's a
And I
good
was like,
motivator.
it's also, huh?
That's a good motivator.
Yeah, yeah. And I also, it was motivating knowing it was going to be a challenge for me. And, if I could overcome this, I could overcome anything. And, um,
Wow.
it was a good choice. I don't think it was overwhelming for me. With how hard I worked during my undergrad, I was ready to take this on. And I knew it wasn't going to be as hard as that. Because like I had conquered that. I was in a horrible headspace in that time of my life and like got into a great headspace. And now that I was able to work that hard in a great headspace, I knew I could do it. And it was a lot of hard work. Like doctoral comprehensive exams, oh my God, are no joke. I remember, the past year, I waited till my third year of my DMA/compositions masters to take comprehensive exams. I didn't quite feel ready during my second year. The thing about taking it during your final year of your DMA is if you fail one of the areas of the comps exams, you have to retake it the next year.
Ha.
So
Wow.
if I didn't pass every single part of that DMA exam, I was going to be there an extra year with no classes to take because I had already completed most of my classes. So I studied harder than I've ever studied for anything in my life with this group of other amazing students who are great friends to this day. We studied our butts off and
A lot of
we,
coffee, probably.
yeah, a lot of coffee, a lot of like early morning and late night study sessions. Um, Man, like for anyone going into DMA comps exams, I think it's worse thinking about it and studying it than it actually ends up being. But like part of the exam is, you have to do a listening exam where they play a 2-minute audio clip and you have to, in 250 words, what 50 years was it composed in history? What genre is it? Possibly like who might the composer be? And just give details about like terms and descriptions of the track. There are like 11 of those, and some of those were hard, but we had so many mock listening exams in those study sessions where started at like minute 12 in symphony number whatever by whoever and would like take the however many minutes to write these 250 words. And but yeah, getting that email that I passed those exams was such a relief. I knew I did well, but there was one part where it's like, oh, did I fail the essay or but passed all of them. And at that point I knew I was safe and I was like gonna graduate. And yeah, this past spring I walked with all my friends with my DMA and masters, and it was such a great feeling. I had been in college without any gap years from 2012 to 2023, or
Wow.
sorry, fall of 2020, 2012, fall of 2012, yeah, the spring of 2023. So great feeling being done. I had never been one to get senioritis, but by that point I was like, I think I've done enough school. So and yeah, now I'm at the point where I am for now like doing some coaching at some middle schools and high schools while simultaneously looking for and applying for college teaching jobs in um theory, composition, low brass, really whatever I see at this point that I think I qualify for, I'm applying for it. Just trying to snag that first job.
So um, where would the ideal location, if you could pick anywhere in the world you'd want to live,
Yeah.
where would it be?
So if we're talking about just like living,
In
I think,
general, like your
yeah,
dream spot where you
dream
would
spot.
like, yeah.
So I'm actually, we'll see, this will confirm this or not. I'm visiting my sister in Portland, Oregon later this summer, and I've just seen so many pictures and heard great things about the Pacific Northwest. I think that might be a ideal place. This will be my first time actually visiting it in person, so we'll see if my opinion holds up after I visit her in Portland. But yeah, I think somewhere where it doesn't get really hot. And Missouri and Michigan in the summers get pretty darn hot. I
Yeah,
know Oregon gets humid.
that's where I got my first case of heat stroke, was up in Michigan.
Yeah. Yeah, it's people don't think Michigan gets that hot, but oh man, those summers are almost as brutal as the Missouri summers. Right now in Missouri, it's like we're in the middle of 100 to 5 degree day stretch for about a week. And this Saturday, I'm going up to visit family in Michigan. Apparently, it's not that bad up there. And we have a cottage on Lake Huron. So I'm planning on spending a lot of time swimming.
That's
So
good.
yeah. But I think just like, somewhere where it's honestly, I love the rain. I love cool weather. Somewhere a little bit up north. But I think I really for now want to stay local to Kansas City. I have a lot of things going on right now here where I have like a good amount of students, schools I'm working at. Fountain City, I play second baritone with the Fountain City brass band. And that is such an incredible experience and great group of people to play with. Everyone in there is again like back at the Ball State camp. Everyone in this group is so dedicated to being great musicians and making this group as great as it's been. And knowing Lee Harrelson, who's the principal euphonium and artistic director of Fountain City. Yeah, if you want to interview someone, interview Lee if you haven't already. He's
Not yet.
yeah, fantastic person, insane euphonium player. He honestly, we did the Missouri Music Educators Conference. Fountain City performed at that last year, and I remember he was the interim UMKC professor when Tom retired, and they were searching for a new professor. Um, he was interim, and I went to a lesson. I heard him like doing a little bit of Harlequin, the Philip Spark
Yeah.
euphonium solo, and it was like I think it was in the early stages. It still sounded good, and I was like, "Oh, you're playing Harlequin for something?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm just working on something a little bit harder." And play with Fountain City. So skip to this like conference like a month later. It was the best live performance I've heard someone play Harlequin in my life. Yeah, it was stupid good, and he had whipped it up in like 2 months. Like, man,
I'm gonna share with you something after we
yeah,
stop recording and everything, that
of course.
it's not totally confirmed, but really amazing info. So
Okay, I'll
uh,
look forward to hearing it.
yeah, it's just a little teaser, especially for those that are listening or watching or reading. Oh boy, I have a treat for everyone. We have a treat. But anyway, so getting back to
Yeah,
your dream location. So maybe not Portland or Pacific
yeah,
Northwest just yet. So
yeah, not just
Kansas
yet.
City area.
Yeah, so a lot of the jobs I'm trying to look for are drivable from Kansas City. My car isn't the most reliable. It's I guess one of the worst cars. It's the 2011 Ford Fiesta. It
Oh
is
boy.
not no offense to Ford. I would not recommend people get a Ford Fiesta if they have the option. I was actually gifted this car by my parents who were gifted it from a neighbor who got the car pretty soon before she entered assisted living and wasn't able to drive anymore. And she had known my family for decades. So that was the car I was given to drive to Kansas City and live down there, which I've been thankful for. Of course, but it's given me so many problems. But anyway, I'm trying to look in like, you know, drivable areas, especially for adjunct jobs where it's so tricky, where they're like, are they worth moving for? These small adjunct jobs. It's like, I've seen one pop up in Georgia. I'm like, man, I'll apply for it just to get my name out there, but I can't move across the country for an adjunct job where I'm not sure,
Right.
that won't give me barely income. So I'm looking for adjunct jobs around here. There's like a theory composition position at Drake University in Iowa that if the application's still open, I'm going to apply for.
So
That's a
what's
full
really great
time.
about this, and
Yeah.
exactly what I was talking about earlier on the transcripts per se, is that this I the concept of what this is working toward, the full reveal, and being able to take this recording and send it to even Drake,
Yeah.
to say, hey, this is what I've done. Here's a great interview that encapsulates my entire life, my where I was, what I've struggled through, where I'm at now. If this fits within your your cadre or your consortium, your other professors and colleagues. If I'm a good fit for you, if you see that I'm a good fit, I would love to come and see if we are truly a good fit.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? I mean, that I might have to send you this recording just so you can do that. See if you would want to do that.
Oh yeah, I would love to. This would be a great resource for that. Um, but yeah, man, it's the tricky part for now is applying for jobs when there aren't a lot of local jobs. And I admittedly started applying pretty late in the summer where it was like a lot of jobs already had found person. People were wrapping up their hiring process. So
Has anybody applied for the Appalachian State gig yet?
I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sure they have. Has that just opened?
Yeah. Uh huh.
Okay, maybe I'll be applying for that then. Oh yeah,
Beth went up to Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt. Yep, because
Yeah.
Jarrett at Vanderbilt is now the new professor at
Uh huh.
UMKC.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Precisely. So there you go. Even more value added.
yeah. So yeah, just applying for a lot of jobs, whether it's low brass or theory or composition or combo, is what I'm doing right now. Um,
The richness that you would bring to any student body uh, to impart your knowledge and your experience uh, by far is it's truly, I mean, it really is inspiring.
thanks.
I mean, and that's not just that's it's not by any means any smoke.
Yeah,
It's I mean you're able to, you've won so many composition competitions. I got it right.
you did.
Competitions. I didn't even have to think about that one.
Yeah.
And you've had such um, a rich past. I think you would really resonate with the student body who would be applying to these universities to
Mhm.
study at for their euphonium studies or
Mhm.
composition or both. And
Yeah.
I don't there someone to be this vulnerable on video with me, and
Mhm.
we just met
Yeah.
um, and we only had a short conversation on social media, and he jumped in because he saw potential somewhere that this might be great for a greater good.
Mhm.
And that initiative right there is where I want to show even more appreciation uh, and give you a recommendation toward something even even though I don't have a bachelor's even through doctorate, but I do have professional experience in the military music arena, being in the First Cavalry Division Band, and professionally, but alongside of other artists and composers who have also stepped up alongside of Dr. Ian Lester is we have Dr. Don Sontag, we have Dr. Devondre Thurman, Dr. Adam Fry, Elizabeth Betsy Rom. We have competitions that have massive pull, like the Ladies Musical Club of Seattle. We have Dr. Brian Meixner. Uh, we have the doctoral student Jason Casanova. We have Dr. Don Palmeyer over at Eastern Carolina University, I believe, which performed and was stationed with Pershing's own and President's own as principal euphonium player, if I'm not mistaken. We have so many don't forget Marina Bozelli in Italy. We have so many artists. So if you get to see this before all the videos are uh, put out, by any means, contact me. I'll send you the entire list of everyone who's provided or scheduled for to be interviewed on this International Euphonium Summit. And if you even want to host International Euphonium Summit in the coming years, um, you will find no more authentic person than anyone that's been interviewed on this. I mean, you could see it in his face. He didn't even know that he was going to get this spot right here, and this recommendation. I really do honestly feel that that whatever he sets his mind to post his first 2 years of undergraduate studies, um, he's one of the phenomenal. Um, it would be a great hire, and with just hearing his vulnerability, no, not very many will be this vulnerable and this authentic, especially with a stranger on a video camera. Uh, for like millions of future
Yeah.
euphonium, current and future euphonium artists, or low brass musicians otherwise. Wow. Anyway, getting back to the interview now. Uh,
Yeah.
so, what would you consider to be key elements to a great warm up? Which, wow, actually, that would be really fitting to these interviews that you want to do. So, what are some key elements for a great warm up routine? Roll right
Yeah.
into that one.
Yeah. For me, I always start with a little bit of stretching and breathing. I mean, I don't do a ton, but a lot of upper body simple stretches. I'm not the most flexible person in the world. I don't do a lot of yoga, but just some stretching, simple breathing exercises, get loosened up a little bit. Um, One thing that I've been doing a lot recently, but that I've done throughout most of my musical life since I started taking lessons, was mouthpiece buzzing. I've been doing a lot of that, teaching that to my sixth grade students in my coaching sessions, and my private lesson students during undergrad when I was studying with Ken Kreshe. He was big on, if you can buzz it, you can play it, buzz everything. And I've been buzzing a lot. But yeah, so breathing, stretching, buzzing. With Tom Stein, I developed my own daily routine sheet or packet. And as someone who, has a lot of experience in putting music into software, I've developed my own, daily routine packet that I have in Sibelius. It's not for sale, but if anyone was ever interested, just email me and I'd give it to you for free, for sure. But starts with long tones, some lip slur exercises that I've made and or collected from other sources and exercises, articulation interval, sort of a collection of, a mini Arbin with some more, tone oriented and phrasing exercises at the beginning. And I've also curated it, a version of it to my own playing weaknesses, where I've always thought my low range was my weakest point. So I put a lot of low range stuff at the end of it too. Because that's I think one area a lot of euphonium players don't pay enough attention to is the mid low range, where it's between pedals and mid range. That's the point where it's like, if you play it a lot and work on it a lot, that's where you get the good tone, but not enough people play it enough.
So it's really interesting. You bring the low tones up, and it
Yeah,
really, and this is definitely not part of the questionnaire. So
sure.
it's going to be interesting. I was talking to a fellow euphonium artist, Marina Bozelli of
Mhm.
Italy, talking about multiphonics and the harmonics series. And you being a composer, you know exactly what I'm speaking about.
Yeah,
And those low tones are the foundation of those harmonic structures.
yeah.
Um, what's your so can you dive a little deeper into kind of your low notes, low tone, um, kind of gym study, like
Mhm.
what you do?
Yeah, so I'll start my low studies by doing long tones, starting on B flat, just second line of the bass clef staff, going down to pedal B flat. And then before I start getting into pedals, I'll do some Bordoni Rochus, usually one or two of them down the octave. Or I'll just read out of the tuba book. But playing those, disregarding the dynamic in the book, I'll play them all full, with a good sound,
Mhm.
a full sound. If I'm trying to work on my quiet low playing, I'll play one quietly, but I usually try to do them with full sound. And then I'll go do some arpeggios that take me down, maybe some scales too, into the pedal range.
Mhm.
Going from pedal B flat, working my way down to F. I'm still working on, below pedal F, getting those smooth.
On euphonium.
Yes, on euphonium. And one thing I've always struggled with was smoothly getting into the pedal register without doing a big shift in the embouchure.
Mhm.
Um, and I still like really struggle with like going from, that shift happens for me at pedal G, from A flat to G, and getting from like, even like pedal A going past G without having to do that shift is something I'm still working on. But yeah, it's I think I spend about 30 minutes about of each of my practice sessions just in the low range stuff, if not more, depending on what I'm doing.
And that's your
Um,
personal study.
yes, that's most of my personal study. I have Jesse Orth's new book, Into the Depths, has been really good for me. It takes you down to those depths, and that book I'd recommend. It's a pretty new book, really
It
useful
is.
for just working on your low and pedal range. Trop Chops by Matt Trotman. Again, that book's not afraid to, start taking you down really into those depths of your range. Um, but it's also good at working you into it and not just like being like do this now, and you know so my study and then some other books I've been utilizing as well.
So let's get back into. I want to bring that with, and tying that into your
Mhm.
ideal position, into potentially tenure position at
Mhm.
a university, right? What would be your ideal euphonium student and or composition student that you would love to teach, to instruct, coach?
Yeah. um Excuse me. I think my ideal student would fall a lot in line with my professor's ideal students that I've had in the past, where I would love to have a student who's just willing to learn, who's engaged, and has potential. um I think that those are the biggest things for me, really. It's like if you are engaged, dedicated, and are willing to learn, I think those are the most important qualities you can have as a student. Again, I think I was selected for that TA spot not because of my playing ability right off the bat, but because of my ability to adapt and learn and, listen to the instructor, be engaged with the lesson, ask my own questions if I had any. But that's definitely my ideal student and who I strive to be as a student and teacher sometimes, is just someone who's engaged, um, listens, asks questions, all that.
So, would you encourage, and I already know the answer, but for those that are listening and watching, would you prefer a student who comes out, and I already know where this is going to go, because you've already kind of answered this before.
Mhm.
Would you prefer a student who would drive all the way out to visit you at your projected campus, your ideal campus, and your ideal student? You'd have them come out and take a lesson or two, or a few times with you before they actually committed to you, the program, the school.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that shows to me and to professors out there, that shows dedication and engagement. And like if you're willing to, especially drive, or travel to the school to take a lesson, I mean, that alone shows that level of dedication that I am really interested in the school and studying with you and seeing how I would work with you as a professor. But we were talking about earlier, like nowadays, even Zoom lessons, like just getting to know that professor and taking the initiative to set up, whether it's an in-person or Zoom lesson,
Like
and
with a
working with
parent
them.
who's trying to schedule a lesson, hint,
Mhm.
hint, links
Yep.
below.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely somehow get in touch and work with that professor before you go to audition or commit to a school. When I was applying for my first master's degrees at various schools, I went to each one, and this was before COVID and Zoom was a big thing. So I drove to each one, and I actually brought in, unless they had specific stuff I had to work on, like specific rep to audition with, I brought in the same material to each audition or to each lesson, brought in the same solo and excerpts each lesson to each different professor. So I could get each of their views and feedback on the same stuff and like have an easier time knowing how I would work with them. Because I think that's important for me is, if you can bring in the same stuff that you're working on for each person, and you sort of get each of their views on the same thing.
That's amazing. So, with doing all that,
Mhm.
what are at least about three things you wished you could have applied or would have applied when you first started learning euphonium and composition that you do teach and coach your students now?
Yeah. Um, Sort of, I think the biggest thing for me, and this is sort of a musical slash non-musical thing, it ties back to my undergrad studies. And even before that, is not being afraid to, ask for help, and also just being on top of things. So by that, I mean, I have so many students who, when they first start lessons with me, they don't write anything in the music. Their music's like loose in their euphonium, like shoved in the bell. And it's like, so disorganized on multiple levels. So I quickly, make sure they know, it's so much more enriching of an experience and easy to do well just by being a little more organized and being more engaged in the music. So I think just, being organized, being on top of things and being engaged with the music is one. Two is a simple thing, using a metronome when I practice. When I throughout high school and when I was in lessons in high school, they'd put on the Met and I'd be fine. But when I was practicing on my own, I was sort of getting away with playing stuff okay without a Met. But when I got to Oakland, Dr. Kreshe immediately caught me and he's like, "Yeah, you're using the Met when you practice now because you're swinging the dotted eighth sixteenths. That dotted eighth was like a dotted quarter. By the way, these are all 32nd notes and you played them as 16th notes." And I was not used to playing with the Met. So I found once I diligently started practicing in efficient ways, sorry, not inefficient, but in efficient ways with a metronome, it really helped me with like the obvious things like rhythm and being more, again, organized and strategic in my music making, being more consistent with the music. Because yeah, when I was practicing without a Met, it was like I was just guessing at something. So I think one thing I always insist my students do when you're practicing something, use a metronome. So many people, so many students hate it, but it's so important. And there are ways to make Met work fun. And there's so many free apps and like low cost apps out there now for like on phones and iPads that have so many customizable variables to set the Met to. The one I use is tonal energy, and it has that smiley face in the center when you're in tune, and like any meter you can imagine with any subdivision. Yeah, so that's two. And then the third one is really again sort of a not strictly musical thing, but it's be yourself. I guess be yourself musically too. Express yourself through the music. And it's easier said than done. And but I think for me, I'm a very stoic person when I'm just talking to people and like just sit. I've had multiple people ask me, "Are you okay?" when I'm just sitting there resting because my face is just stoic. But I've found that my just mindset and my way of expressing myself has been through music, and it's been one of the most valuable things for me. And it's really just helped my, I think, mental state overall is being able to express myself through the music. And I think it's one of my strong suits as a player is my musicality and the way I phrase things and all that stuff. But I think, yeah, being organized on top of the music, use a Met, and express yourself in the music. Don't be afraid to be musical.
So I want to kind of go back over your low note routine.
Yeah.
That goes with articulations. Articulations are really hard. It feels like kind of you're like a woodcutter at a big oak tree or something like that. How do
Yeah.
you approach articulations in the low register?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think several years ago, a euphonium player from Europe, Glenn Van Looy,
Uh-huh.
put out a short video on YouTube where he was talking about, some of his warm-up routines. I don't know what the video was called. It was like from 6, 7 years ago at this point. He did this one exercise that was so simple but seemed very effective. It was a B flat major scale starting on pedal B flat, where you play like groups of 4 pedal B flats and then 2 extras of those pedal B flats, and then go up the scale 1, 2, or 3 octaves, then play the top B flat, whichever your top B flat you choose, either 4, 8, 12, 16 times in a row with 2 extras, and then you go back down. So altogether it sounds like 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 dot 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 dot. But just that, like, and it's our tonguing all those notes, no slurring it. So you're doing repeated pedal notes, in this case B flat, and traversing through the range, articulating the same way throughout the entire range, then coming all the way back down to those pedals, trying to make all the notes sound just as equal in tone and quality. That was one huge thing Dr. Kresge and I worked on during my undergrad. Was I had great mid-range, sort of singing high range, I started getting pinched really up there. Then my low range was what I call the Squidward low range, where it sounds really nasally, like sounded like this, and very pinched. So we were working a lot on, doing different things to stabilize the tone and consistency throughout the range. So that exercise I've been doing for years now, where I'll start it once I've done some of the low range stuff that I've talked about. Some days I'll do this one where I'll do pedal B flat. You can vary up the speed of it too. So if you're trying to work on fast time, you can da 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 da, or even just trying to get it consistent and really dive into the sound quality. I do it a lot slower. Start on pedal B flat, 3-octave pedal B flat scale, and then go to A, 3-octave A flat, G flat, F. And I'm starting to really try and dive into like the E flat, D, pedal D flat, C range. But yeah, I think that exercise alone has helped me a ton with articulation in the low range, and articulation getting out of the low range and back into it from other ranges. And you can like vary up which articulation style you do, obviously. So sometimes I'll do staccato, sometimes I'll do tenuto, accented, different dynamics. But yeah, I found that, when I first started trying to work on articulation in the low range, it feels so different, and it is so much more difficult at first to like, tongue down there just as effectively and sounding just as good as, just tonguing a middle F, right? So yeah, I do think working on articulation down there is super important, because again, a lot of people don't do it enough. Like, we all practice in our mid-range and high range as euphonium players. Everyone loves ripping up to a high C, but no one ever works on like low D flat and like just tonguing, those boring notes that are just muddy. But you don't have to make them muddy if you work on them a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
So how important is sight reading to you?
Yeah. So sight reading, gonna be completely honest, I did it a lot before, and I've sort of like let it go recently. But I think I was thinking about this, and I was like, I don't remember practicing in my own practice sight reading a ton. But then I realized I've been in so many ensembles and groups and done enough pieces where I feel like, the first time I get music and I'm sight reading that, I've been in so many groups where I'm just reading stuff for the first time, where it's really challenged my sight reading abilities. And when I first started in Fountain City, for example, the first time I played with them, put the music in front of my stand, hard stuff, not easy, brass band test piece level stuff. And I'm expecting everyone to like, play okay, because it's the first time we're all playing it. That opened my eyes to, maybe I need to work on my sight reading a little bit, because man, people knocked it out of the park right away. Me not included. So it's been sort of an on and off relationship with me actually practicing sight reading. I think for me, one of the ways I've done it was, I have so many etude books and exercises books that I've looked at like maybe a few pages of, where, I'll open up a page I've never looked at before and, run it, hit it, try and, take a few minutes or take a minute beforehand to look it over. I remember in high school, when we did solo and ensemble competitions, and, all state, you'd get that sight reading, get a minute to look over it, and then you got to play it. That's sort of the approach I practice in my own practice when I do sight reading, is get the music, take a look at it for a minute, study it, and then do it to the best of my ability, and then never look at it again, as a sight reading thing. And I honestly just like, sometimes I will, not quite sight reading, but like improvising is right now, not jazz improvisation, because I'm horrible at jazz, but I like to say I can improvise. But the way I improvise a lot in my practice is through drone work. I'll have there on Spotify, there's these few great tracks. They're just called organ drones. And then there's a bagpipe version too, where they'll play drones at different pitches. Then I will just improvise over those drones. And it's both a tuning exercise with the drone, but also just one where I'm developing these melodies. It's like the composition and performance just fuse into one. And I'm just developing stuff on the spot. And excuse me, I think that alone, I've been doing that consistently for a while, has helped my composition and how quickly I'm able to develop melodies in my compositions. That's helped that. But I've had several students come up to me and be like, hey, should I be working on sight reading? Like, how do I do this? And I've always, encouraged them to, look at stuff they may have that they never looked at before, look at music that like, stuff they haven't seen before, and dive into it, approach it with a strategy, but just sight read it. Because I think it is important, but like for me personally, I haven't incorporated it as much as I think I should have. Because there are instances where, again, get to Fountain City, I'm like, if I was a better sight reader, this first read probably would have went a little smoother.
Sure. So, do you teach other clefs besides just bass clef?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for knowing treble clef, B flat treble clef, and tenor clef.
What about
When
alto clef?
I Huh?
What about alto clef?
Alto clef, I mean, if they want to learn it, I'll teach it, but I've never had to encounter that. I know, got like some alto trombone parts, but I've never as a euphonium player had to play an alto clef or soprano clef.
Right.
But I've had, students who are interested in, joining like Fountain City Academy brass band, or, stuff where they're going to encounter B flat treble clef. And I've had some students start on treble clef, and, then I'll be like, all right, let's learn bass clef too. Because, as a high school band student, you're going to encounter your band director handing out parts, and they're like, oh, this composer doesn't have a treble clef part. Here's a bass clef part. Or, they just have trombone parts. So here's the trombone part. As a treble clef euphonium player, it's like, uh-oh, you don't know bass clef.
Right.
So yeah,
Especially those students that come over from the trumpet side.
yeah, yeah, especially. And I've had a few students who have been, trumpet converts, and yeah, teaching them bass clef's been really good. Me personally, I started on bass clef. I didn't know there were other clefs to read until I got to undergrad. And
Oh
Dr.
man.
Yeah, because I didn't take anything except for band in high school, and fortunately, rarity, I never encountered a treble clef euphonium part in high school. And which will not happen for most people, but I somehow got away with it. And then first day of undergrad, Dr. Kreshe, I think it's a book by Fink called Tenor Clef Studies.
The tenor clef studies, yeah.
Yeah, and that got me introduced to tenor clef. Then he had me work out of, I think it was Vern Reynolds trumpet etudes. There's some challenging ones in there, and they're all B flat treble clef for trumpet. And then I myself got what's still one of my favorite books to this day is by Lynn's Lip Flexibilities,
There you go.
with a lot of Lipsler stuff, all in B flat treble clef. So I also was thrown into the fire on first baritone in the Oakland brass band. My first day there, I couldn't read treble clef, and we were in rehearsal
Yeah.
playing stuff. And so, you know, I do think for a lot of cases, best way to learn something is to be thrown in the fire like that, as long as this is a supportive environment. But yeah, I quickly learned treble clef to keep up with that brass band stuff. And my last year of undergrad, I went to the E flat bass in our brass band and played in the tuba section. And like it was another like instance of like just learning a new almost clef all over again, as the new fingerings on E flat tuba. And that was the first tuba I'd ever played. And it was just mind boggling once again. We're like, okay, I really gotta learn this. Again, thrown into the fire, learning some hard tuba parts. And yeah, so I'm a big advocate for knowing different clefs,
Cool.
and being able to read those efficiently.
Cool. So we've already covered quite a bit of your journey and
Yeah.
influences and such like that, and who you learned from. But we didn't. I'd like to give you an opportunity to kind of showcase any elements that you picked up from learning uh, that you received from Tom Stein or King Crashy or Michael Steele or Norm Logan or any elements that you pick up that you utilize with your students now.
Yeah, for sure. I would say like I was gonna quantify it. 80% of my teaching is just mashups of the best stuff that I gathered from my teachers. And I try and make a little bit of that my own. The first thing is when I was in middle school, I was, a goof off. I didn't care about band. My middle school teacher, Rob Wilson, like sat down with me and like one on one and would teach me how to read music. And he was so nice and kind and patient with me. And like that kind of patience, welcomingness, and warmth, uh, I really think was the reason I started getting invested in it. And like I was interested. It would have been so different if he was impatient and, just like not willing to sit down with me and teach me. But I think he saw the potential. So something I try and do is just, be there for my students, be kind and like be open to, what they might be experiencing, sort of treat them as their own individual.
So how do you teach that to a beginner collegiate level artist that's going into music education?
Yeah, especially with music ed, it's like they're going to be encountering so many students, all these different individuals. I think, the big thing is for me, treating each person like their own person. And, it's a lot. It's a big answer, right? But
Right.
I think that it's so important is just be patient, be kind. Um, I hate like the idea of, every student's the same, like standardized testing, all that. It's like if there were ways to be more individual, go for it. But I think the big thing for me is the teachers I still respect the most and who have had lasting impressions on me have been the like kind, the patient, the like, picturesque mentor type of people. I had an English teacher in high school who still remains like one of my favorite teachers of all time, just because how patient he was with me. And like I wasn't a bad student, but he had a great balance of like being able to control the classroom, but also just being like one of the nicest people I've ever met. Um, so teaching my students to be kind people and accepting is important. I think if I do become a professor and I have my own studio, I'm gonna follow in the footsteps of all my teachers, especially Tom Stein, of really trying to include people in my studio who are genuine people and like kind and accepting and like makes continues the sense of acceptance in my studio. Like I don't want anyone who will make anyone feel unsafe or unaccepted in my studio. I think for me that's the biggest thing is not even a musical thing, but just like every I want to be associated with, accepting people, kind people. I think my students should learn to be that too, It's not that hard to be kind to others and it's interesting. Now I feel like so many people have gotten a little short-tempered since the pandemic. And more impatient, but I think it's important to be kind to others. And like for me in undergrad, like I was going through so much and no one knew, but the fact that people were there to support me and were willing to be there to support me, not knowing that I was like on the verge of a mental crisis, like really saved me.
But they also called you out too.
They
They
did,
weren't
yeah.
afraid to.
Yeah, they called me out, and it's like I needed that. Like again, like my English teacher, I needed that balance of calling me out, being like, "Hey, you need to like do something," and but also them doing something and being there for me. So there's that. I think that's the big thing. I think um, trying to think of some other big things. All little things like putting the focus on low range. Sometimes I've had almost all of my students when they first came in, that seemed to be the one range where it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
everyone
yeah.
struggles. Yeah, the extreme high range too, but that range where it's like not an extreme range, but it's like one no encounter. So I've incorporated that a lot into my teaching of my own students. Um, I always encourage them to do any festivals, competitions that they want to do, stuff like that. That's so important. There's like there's some competitions I like more than others. I don't dislike any, but it's like, for example, the one I loved myself the most was MTNA, the Music Teachers National Association. They have, young artists and student and senior level competitions with performance and composition in brass, woodwind, piano, vocal, blah blah blah. The thing I liked about that one is you can pick your own set list of rep.
Mm-hmm.
It's not assigned, and so I would always pick stuff that highlighted my strengths as a player, and that in turn, I would be the most confident performing. And something I haven't said yet is I've always struggled with nerves really bad on stage. Like I still get really bad stage fright, especially in a solo setting or public speaking setting.
Like recitals and
Um,
such.
hmm,
Like recitals and such.
yes, recitals, especially competitions where I figured out when I'm not, it's not that I'm not prepared, but when I am not as comfortable with the music as I could be, I am a wreck. But also it depends on there have been things I've been wondering why I still get nervous. I did a solo, for example, at the North American Brass Band Championships last year that I had spent a year, solid year, working up with Lee Harrelson. He was a great teacher with me. We worked that solo up. It was a slow melody, but it was, pretty hard. It was Capriccio maybe by Paganini. Went up to high D flats, a bunch of range, but I had it really high level. And when I got to NABA in Huntsville, Alabama, it was a combination of, we had to drive overnight to get there from Kansas City because we had a rehearsal with Fountain City that day when we got there, and we didn't want to fly there, So it was a scheduling thing where we took turns driving, me and our studio. But then also the piano we used in the performance was like this tiny piano that it scared me. It like made me paranoid that like, oh, this isn't like a piano I'm used to. Am I gonna be able to hear it? Um, and then like I was just getting in my own head, and all these like external factors that didn't really matter besides the driving. I think that did contribute to my shakiness. But like the piano, I was like, oh, is the accompanist gonna like take it too fast? We're only rehearsing once before the performance. I just got in my own head, and it ended up being one of the worst, like in my opinion, solo performances I've ever done. And this was just last year, and I had done so many better performances. So I still think about, I'm big on thinking back and like figuring out stuff, and whether that's just in my own practice. Like one big thing I try and teach my students is you don't always have to be on the horn when you're practicing. Like um when you're doing repetition of repeating stuff in practice, which I think is important, it has to be like relaxed but focused repetition. So many people repeat stuff and just get frustrated as they keep repeating it and it's not getting better and they're not thinking about it. And so what I do in my own practice is I'll, do some reps, then put the horn down and think about it and like, okay, how can I make this better? What's going on here? So the same thing with that. I've been like, thinking about, okay, why did I got extremely nervous during that performance? Demondre Thurman was the judge. Um, and we've talked since too, but he's great. But I was like, did I get nervous because it was Demondre? That's probably not it, because I auditioned for him at Indiana for my first masters, and it was a very strong audition in my mind, and I was comfortable playing for him. And I was like, was it the people in the audience? It's like all other brass players, and like Cressy was in the audience, like people I look up to, and I don't think that was it. And I think, what it came down to was some factors like the overnight drive. And I think part of it was I realized that performance was at 8:30 in the morning, and I didn't do any breathing or stretching like I usually do. Like I sort of accidentally went against the grain and didn't do my usual warm up. And I think for me, consistency in a daily routine and consistency in practice has been my keys to success. And that one day where I was like, okay, I'm running a little bit late, I'll do a quick warm up, screwed me over for that day. I didn't get a good warm up in, then started getting in my own head, and I was like, oh, that wasn't a good warm up. And then, I think the breathing would have helped that a lot. I don't do meditating per se, but I do a lot of just like trying to get my head in the right
Right.
space before I perform, but I just rushed myself and overthought for that performance. So um that's another thing where just like I try and, I think something I like to teach my students is if they're doing a competition and if they get nervous, I always ask my students, do you get nervous when you perform? And most of them will say yes to some extent, whether it's, every time or only when I'm doing a solo or only when I'm talking in front of a crowd. I try and teach, the importance of getting in that headspace, not thinking too hard about it. And, I personally know it's easier said than done to not overthink things. I'm a big overthinker. But I just try and give them, think about, as cliche as it sounds, think about whatever relaxes you the most. Like whether it's, visiting family, being on a tropical island, or just envision yourself playing the crap out of this. Like if that helps you, thinking positively, I think that's a big thing. Um, that's actually, yeah, a really big thing. I used to go into performances not realizing I was thinking about what could go wrong. And I would always think about the hard part of the piece, that one part that I've been practicing a lot, I've gotten better, but it's the hard one. And then sure enough, if I went into a performance with that mindset, I'd mess it up, that part. Um, so over time, I
Trained yourself.
what?
You trained yourself. You're training
Yeah,
yourself.
I trained myself and others like told me their experiences too. I trained myself to go, be confident, know, trust the work I put into it, and go in just envisioning myself, creating the best music I can. And that doesn't always mean you're playing 100% accurate. It's like if you are putting your soul and heart into that music, that's what it's about. All the way back to that camp I went to, it's like that's the feeling musicians chase after, is that like incredible feeling of, I just put everything into that and left nothing on stage.
Wow, that's incredible.
Thanks.
Uh, that's it, each time I do these interviews, I don't necessarily. I have a framework that I've developed, and I
Mhm,
love to dive deeper on some questions over
mhm.
others, and others. You've looked through the list already, and you've
Yeah.
combined some fluid answers and encapsulated a lot of content, and then getting to know you personally through this interview, to seeing where you are at currently and how further I can assist or provide extra value to where you're at and where
Mhm.
you want to be, especially in with the ability to kind of adapt questions to where you are going to face on this next this next chapter shift in your
Yeah.
life, whether it's at Drake or Portland University or wherever you may end up. Um, I mean, it's always going to fit where you're at currently,
Yeah.
and that's going to be an amazing thing to where you bring those experiences, the ability to teach your students, to not teach, coach, because
Mhm.
you've mentioned even from the initial moments of our interview, you coach, you use that word
Yeah.
specifically, and I think that is a great framework to start with, is seeing yourself as a coach, not a professor, not a teacher, coach.
Mhm.
um,
I also love the word guide too. I think you know, us being our own teachers is big. And I think, the best teachers I've had haven't really been teachers. They've been mentors and guides to me. And that's what I try and pass on to my students is, at the same time I'm guiding them through their stuff, they're also learning to become their own teachers and their own mentors and, being able to practice on their own effectively and productively.
and that's a really great way of encapsulating this whole interview. Is it sounds like you coached them into being self accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, you had to learn that with the encouragement and the mentorship you went through in your undergraduate years,
Yeah.
and spinning that around to where you that's a bedrock element in your foundation, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, if I know so many students struggle in college, and in addition to them, wanting to let them know, yeah, it's okay to get help, and reach out to people, being able to be self-accountable is really important. I learned that the hard way. Like I almost, dropped out. It took me so long to be self-accountable because, as great of teachers as I had, I do wish there was someone who was like, a little bit sooner sat me down and was like, you need to, get your stuff together. But I think part of that was like for a while it just did seem like I was being lazy, and
So
a
do
lot
you,
of stuff that people didn't know was going on.
yeah, do you think if someone were to have sat you down any earlier than that precise moment, you may not have heard what you needed to hear to become self-accountable?
Mm. That's a good question. I think part of it was like if it would have been sooner, I don't think so. As time went on, before I got that sit down talk type of thing, I think I was getting in a worse and worse mental state where I think if maybe someone would have, if I would have learned to become self accountable sooner, it wouldn't have had the same impact on me. Because by the point where Dr. Kresge and our head of theory did, like, say you need to get your stuff together, I was at a point where I just needed someone to tell me that and like help me become self accountable. Um, but yeah, it was like, I guess timing of it was the perfect timing where like that was the point in my life where I absolutely needed to hold myself accountable or else I was done. One thing I've tried to get better at myself in the past is not waiting till the absolute last second before I do something, being proactive. Like one of the big things, again, being open about my like health and stuff is like I have really, I guess I have high blood sugar and high blood pressure. We have a family history of it. I'm trying to tackle that ahead of time. A lot of males in our family have had heart attacks at young ages, and um I don't want to follow that route. And I've had in my past throughout my life, I've always waited till I've tended to wait till something absolutely needed to be done to do something. And it's not quite procrastination, but some of it is like homework in undergrad. I waited till the last second to do it, and it was always a bad job, right? You can't rush it. Um, so I've the past several years I've worked hard on, jumping the gun and being proactive on things that, if I wait, it's not a good idea. So yeah.
That's great. That's really actually that captured right there. I think um, some really crucial elements uh, to um, to future endeavors. I'll just leave it a crunch like that right there.
Yeah.
Um, that's really awesome. So let's dive back into because when you go back and hear the other interviews,
Hmm.
you'll understand why this uh, at the 2 hour mark or so like that when we get to this when you get to hear this maybe it's the um, hour and a half mark. Let's see, we
So 350 we
no,
started.
it's at the 2 hour mark
Yeah.
on actual video,
Yeah.
where this will be is this particular question sequence that I developed, and you'll see why. And it's talking about off horn elements to increase performance abilities. You're
Hmm.
buzzing, and that's one thing that I've encountered a lot doing these interviews, conducting these interviews,
Hmm.
is um, we're not necessarily in this those of us that do buzzing off horn. um, what does that mean, off horn buzzing to you?
Hmm. That for me means buzzing on the mouthpiece with intent to, like, not just buzzing to buzz. But for me, buzzing really has helped me with tone, airflow, and just response, and my ear too. Um, when I worked on buzzing with Dr. Kresge, he'd have me buzz like singable melodies, like I think his go-to might have been God Bless America. Or no, it was My Country 'Tis of Thee. Um, and he let me buzz that. And it's like, again, if you can buzz it, like you're working your ear, you're using a lot of air, getting that good buzz. And I think it helps with the tone on the instrument. Tom Stein was big on, or is big on, getting a velvety buzz where it has, a lot of freedom and that velvety quality to it, that warm quality, where it's not pinched, it's not completely airy, but it has that full, just supported buzzing sound. And having that sort of descriptor helped me a lot when when I've been buzzing since I heard that from him, is like having that like sound that I wanted in a buzz. I think a lot of people buzz and don't think about what sound they're getting when they buzz. And that sound you get when you buzz is a like telltale sign of like, are you really tense? Are you pinching it? Is it too airy? Like you want to pay attention to that sound when you buzz.
So let's go on to that a little bit more,
Yeah.
if I may be able to. How would you coach a euphonium artist that's coming into your studio, or that's currently in your studio? How do you coach their awareness of their buzz, of their
Mhm.
lip structure, of what they're doing on their with their lips and their mouthpiece?
Yeah. So I've like sort of taken a little bit of what Tom Stein has taught me and I've incorporated my own thing too. So Tom was really big at like, letting the air do the work. And if, the air is working properly, a lot of other things fall into place, embouchure wise and like all that stuff. I do think, I include a little bit more like embouchure talk with my students. Um, with like, for example, my sixth graders I'm working with right now, I like to use like, fun like scenarios where it's like pretend you're like blowing on hot soup and you're splashing the person across the table from you with that soup and keep them engaged. But like if it's a incoming euphonium artist, it's going to be more about for me, I like to think of corners engaged. I like to think of a flat face where when your embouchure, you should think of like vertically flat, not lips pushing out like kissy face or anything. But again, I put most of the focus in making sure the air is flowing freely and you're using a lot of it when you buzz. Because I found with my students, if you're using a ton of air when you buzz, getting a big full buzz, the embouchure is usually not too tight or anything, and it's usually not too loose either. It's
Right.
usually falls into place with that air. Um, and I found that all the way from like my sixth graders to like the one undergrad student I taught when Stein wasn't there. He was sick one day, and I taught an undergrad student. Um, but yeah, it's really like a lot of air talk and flat face, but mostly air.
And keeping the aperture open.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Like if I feel like they're getting that really pinched like buzz, like a trumpet player or whatever. I do, yeah, I do talk a little bit about aperture. I'll just be like, that hole between your lips, make sure it's not completely closed. Try and keep it a little bit more open. Um, yeah, and then not necessarily with just buzzing, but I think it was Lee Harrelson who taught me this. Maybe it was Stein, might have been both. Picturing a tennis ball in the back of your throat with like the openness
Uh-huh.
when you're like exhaling and blowing through the instrument mouthpiece. I just think that mental image and just the feeling you get of really getting that open vowel shape in the back of your throat has helped
Uh-huh.
me tremendously as a player.
One thing that it's really interesting. When I was going through and teaching my kids how to open up their components and opening up their sound, my private lesson, my instructor at college would always tell me, "Suck an egg."
Yeah.
And my kids would always bust out laughing. And it doesn't really, it's not really a good sequencing of terms
Mhm.
nowadays as much as it was 25 years ago or so.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's really fascinating learning how uh, people, coaches, mentors, private lesson teachers, uh,
Mhm.
their perspective in teaching certain elements um, of euphonium performance or
Yeah.
musicality. And I think you really hit it on the head with the musicality portion of, it's not perfection per se, but it's passion.
Yeah, yeah.
What would you say your strength would be in? What's your strongest element of teaching and coaching when it comes to, and um, maybe it's something different than what we've already spoken about, but
Mhm.
what would you say is your bread and butter of your coaching?
Yeah. I think my current strong point that I've sort of realized is like sort of opening up students' minds to interpreting music and again being as musical as they can be with it. And I'm a big advocate. If you are doing a one octave major scale, it should be the most musical scale you ever play in your life. Everything can be musical. I don't think there's benefit to just practicing, an Arbin technical study without like, putting music into it. Yeah, it gets your fingers better or whatever, but what's the point of it if you're not playing it as a piece of music? um and like really making something musical, I found, just promotes great airflow and momentum in the air. I've always been taught, forward moving air, always, like always the air is moving forward. I found when you're being musical and phrasing things, that really promotes that just forward moving air and just building that momentum up. um so I think that's been my bread and butter. I think a lot of students have come to me where they just played in band and they've played their band parts, whether it's the tuba part that's like doubles the bass drum or whatever, where it's just like boring as heck. But just
Sonata
like,
feats.
right, yeah. Or euphonium players where it's like the trombone three part is doubled or whatever. But um I just, it's always interesting seeing their reactions when like I tell them like, when I'm playing the Clark #1 chromatic scales, I'm always adding like dynamics, like rubato. I'm doing whatever like I can make it more musical with. um Even things like with those chromatic scales, I always practice the metronome, so maybe not rubato, but sometimes I'll have the metronome where the beep is on the offbeat, so I'm like trying to feel it in a different way. Or I'll do it as triplets and or halftime, and but I'm always, for sure adding phrasing to it. Whether it's a single tonguing exercises in Arbin or whatever, it's like I'm trying to make it musical, and they're always blown away by like, you know, oh, I can make anything music, like no matter what it is. And it's interesting also seeing they always become, they always use their air better when they're thinking musically, from what I've experienced.
Sure. So, as a potential euphonium professor,
Mhm.
how would you coach your euphonium studio members to, if whether they're performance or music ed or just taking lessons with you to keep their skill out um, while in your studio as a different major? How would you coach them in reaching out and taking initiative and building their own practice, building their own uh, what we're doing here, building their
Yeah.
own job marketability.
Yeah. Um, that's a great question because it's like such a, it really depends on the individual. Like,
It does. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And for me personally, I I sort of, with the help of others, but I think mostly myself, I realized that I, first of all, I was not going to be able to be a military musician. I have enough health problems where even if I weighed less, I'd be not eligible. So I knew that was out of the question for a job. You know, I sort of knew during, I think I want to say late undergrad, that I wanted to teach euphonium more than play it as a living. And I sort of figured out on my own as I started finding more success with composition that I wanted to pursue that too. I think, you know, it is for the most part up to the student to find that inner passion and what their strong suits are. Yes, like we're all here to help them and we will like guide them and mentor them and help them find that, okay, what can we do here? You're really good at conducting, that's awesome, let's pursue that too. Or you you arrange stuff really good. Have you ever tried arranging like a marching band chart? And like, there are a lot of opportunities, and
Hmm.
like I think it's nowadays especially it's so competitive where you need to have your own little like niche, or
Yes.
and be really good at like what you do, and be good at something that's not just playing your instrument, in my opinion, in today's economy. um and yes, like you have people who are so good that they get jobs and
Mhm.
are set for life just playing their instrument. But for a lot of us, it is really smart to start learning and getting good at something, whether it's musical or non-musical, that you have in addition to playing your instrument. That you can be like, hey, I think I would be good at this job that I'm applying for, or this gig, because I also, double on trumpet, or blah blah blah, or I conduct, I blah blah blah, play tuba, trombone. And I think, finding that, and you don't have to like be good at it like right away. I think I
Absolutely.
wasn't, yeah, and I wrote the stupidest melodies when I first started composing that made no sense. I remember I uh actually went back to my Note Flight account the other day, and it still
Was
had
this
my
after you
login.
got my questionnaire or before?
No, it was before. So I'm part of this thing called the Millennium Composers Initiative, which is run by like some great composers like Kevin Day, and Kataj Copley's in it, and plenty of others, Chris Evan Haas. And we had this little social hangout on Zoom. We played like some Zoom games and stuff. And someone suggested, as a joke, the next social get together should be us sharing our first compositions. And everyone was like, "Oh no," because all of us, no one has a good first composition. And nowadays, like as the composers grow older, we all like look back on those first pieces like that was so cringy. Um, but I went back to my Note Flight account, and sure enough, like there's one piece I wrote where it was the day we learned what suspensions were in Music Theory 1. And every bar was a different kind of suspension. And it
Oh
was
no.
so bad. It was for like 6 euphoniums, and like euphonium 1 was like in the stratosphere the whole time. Nothing was good about it. Um, but
So that's way beyond our some of our student artists and parents comprehension currently. The suspensions, and that's definitely music theory, and there's a ton of yeah. So pardon the techno babble, the momentary
yeah,
techno babble, but that's definitely something I would love to see you post some of those as memes.
yeah, I might honestly. I was listening back and I was like, man, some of these either make no sense or aren't playable, or just are really funny because you could tell I learned a specific thing that day. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Or I like listened to, or I learned a piece in music history, and the piece I wrote sounds exactly like it. It's interesting.
So I want to get to a question that's not in this, it's not on this questionnaire that I took off
Sure.
because you're a composer artist. Is what's your favorite condensed score do you have a favorite condensed score that you go back and reference or just get inspiration from?
Yeah. So I mean, I guess define condensed score. Like you mean piano
Any
score?
score of music.
Okay. Yeah. So currently, my like really currently, like recently, I found out this piece was so at the end of NABA, the North American Brass Band Championships last year, they announced the test pieces for this year, for all the bands to play. In the championship section, all the bands are going to be playing this piece called Other Lives by Oliver Westby. His last name is like W, maybe Aespi. It's something. He's a European guy. But it's this piece I believe is based on or surrounded by like Schubert. But it is such a cool piece. It's like 21 minutes of either beautiful writing or really exciting writing. So that, for like brass band stuff right now, that's my go-to. And I'm like looking at the score and like studying it. Because a lot of the orchestration is really great too. And that's one thing I've struggled with as a composer when writing for large ensembles, is balancing the orchestration, and having it sound really seamless and smooth and balanced. And I've gotten better at that, I think, through score study. I've been meaning to buy the score to Kevin Day's Concerto for Wind Ensemble, because that is such a cool piece, a newer piece. If you haven't heard it, I'd recommend listening to it, because it is, first of all, for those listening and watching, Kevin is an amazing human, also one of the leading composers of today, of just music, not just euphonium stuff. A lot of euphonium players know him through his euphonium concerto, but he recently wrote sort of recently wrote a concerto for wind ensemble that I think was nominated for a Pulitzer. Um, so yeah, and it's incorporates so many different like genres of music, like jazz and so many different inspirations, funk, jazz, gospel, classical, whatever. It's like, but it works so well. Um,
It's really interesting. You mentioned a word that I showcased on my previous interview just today is
yeah,
Pulitzer. And if those that aren't watching these in sequence or however, whatever order, Pulitzer is not a uh, an award that we associate at all with music, music composition, music performance, anywhere in the musical field. And so for it's really really interesting that both my interviews today alone have included that element specifically.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean the Pulitzer Music Award is like, I think in the composition world, very uh sought after and very prestigious. It's like basically like an Academy Award or Grammy Award for classical composers, and like almost every serious composer would apply for it. And it's like, so it's super competitive.
so, would you consider yourself someone that competitive that when you're a professor, you would have the ability or the ability and or encouragement from the your colleagues in your workplace that you your dream job that
Mhm.
would encourage you to write music in such a way that would bestow this award by
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah, I would really hope, excuse me, I'd really hope that, my colleagues and my dream job would be supportive of that, and potentially like enable me to have some resources to write a piece where it could potentially be Pulitzer winning piece. I think you know there's a history of the Pulitzer. I think a lot of operas and orchestral pieces win usually every year. I've never written an opera. I think Kevin Day is actually planning on writing an opera soon. I think I saw a post from him, but I'll have to double check it was him. But anyway, yeah, I'd be like, I think writing a large scale work, whether it's orchestral, opera, even wind band, writing those big pieces, I've always wanted to do. I wrote some shorter wind band pieces and like a 10-minute brass band piece. But I've always I plan to write some big works in my future. And I think an important part of that is, having a supportive environment around you. And like, yeah, just having supportive colleagues, having resources if they're available to like, pull that kind of thing off. Um, when I was an undergrad, I was fortunate to win the Provost Undergraduate Research Grant, which enabled me to perform John Stevens' work, Prometheus and the Gift of Fire, with orchestra and or string orchestra. And I was able to hire a string orchestra, and that piece I think was originally for, I can't remember if it was original, but I saw C trumpet and Tuba-Euphonium ensemble
Wow.
as the instrumentation. Yeah, and then Matt Morellis, euphonium player
Uh-huh.
and professor, on his CD called Prometheus, has the only recording of it with euphonium and string orchestra. And I looked everywhere for the sheet music for the euphonium and string orchestra version, but I could only find trumpet and string orchestra. So I eventually just bought the music and then put the trumpet part to bass clef euphonium. But if I was really good at reading C trumpet, which I should have been, I could have just read that. But yeah, I think grants like that are great too, having resources like that. um I recently wrote a trombone and fixed media piece for my colleague and friend, Brent Mead, who is doing this really cool tour. I think he just did the last performance at ITF of this piece that I wrote for him in Salt Lake City. This tour was, or this sort of recital program he took around a few different places. He commissioned, it was around, I think, seven, maybe a different number, but it was around seven composers. Each one wrote a piece about things that people deal with that, he wants them to know they're not alone. And there's like, light at the end of the tunnel, not in terms of like, you can cure everything, but everything can be managed. And like, there's help out there. You're not alone. It was a really cool concept that like I think was great with resonating with young people who again might be struggling and not sure what to do. My piece I wrote was called Social. It was about social anxiety, which I struggle to with some extent, especially like in person with someone I don't know. It might not seem like it with this interview, but I feel like for some reason I have such a more easy time virtually talking to someone than just like in person. Um, but I wrote that piece, but that was only possible through him fortunately getting a grant through his university to like fund this whole recital series, gave him a grant to purchase the electronics equipment because it was for also my piece involved guitar pedals. So it was like amplified trombone with electronics and guitar pedals. And that really helped him bring the whole idea to life. So I think that's super important. But I think the big thing is, being confident in yourself and having supportive friends and colleagues who are just there to, help you keep rising up.
I don't know if you know
Yeah,
how Aaron Copland got to write Fanfare for the Common Man.
I don't.
You should go look that up. It
Okay.
was a great commissioning for, I believe, the Great War Initiative. It was this. Oh man, I need to do my own. Go back into my own research, but it's on the internet,
Mhm.
and all these greatest composers were commissioned to write a piece of nationality to get the war efforts going and just really inspire America to,
Mhm.
get going. And maybe I'll I'll send you the research that I found. Uh,
Yeah.
but it was a commissioning of several composers
Mhm.
around the I want to say around the world,
Mhm.
and it was as I was looking up the reason why, um, as I'm like, okay, so it was those engaged in World War II, um, and it was commissioned. Oh man, I hate Dead Space in. Oh yes, that's why I. So I was doing research on Eugene Goossens, the conductor of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. He commissioned a large consortium of American composers to
Mhm.
write patriotically titled fanfares for brass and percussion to
Huh.
open each of his concerts during the 42-43 series. And Copeland, like yourself, for this interview
Yeah.
for the International Euphonium Summit, responded enthusiastically. Um, and I'm reading that description right off of the Rhode Island Philharmonic. I actually have quite a few books on Eugene Goossens in my own personal research. Yeah,
Mhm.
I love to geek out on stuff like that, genetics, neuroscience, all sorts of really, for me, interconnecting stuff. So to give you kind of even more value with previous interviewees that I've had with composers, and some ways to go over kind of writer's block when it comes to composing larger pieces is some things I've gleaned from learning from composers is take those full scores and rewrite them in your own hand.
Mhm.
Each note specifically, not cheating by going and just entering it in with the MIDI keyboard or Finalier Sibelius, but writing it by hand, learning the chord progressions, and these are some of the top techniques that I've gleaned from these amazing composers. So from Other Lives or even the Concerto for Wind Ensemble, going over each of these amazing scores that have inspired you, obviously, and writing them by hand. And then I like to say, if you haven't watched Finding Forrester, I do refer to that movie a lot.
Mhm.
Have you seen that movie with Sean
What was
Connery?
it called again?
Finding Forrester.
I have not.
It's about a basketball kid who is really gifted in writing,
Okay.
and he's coached by uh, Sean Connery in this movie, and award-winning novelist, worth the magnum opus of novels in the movie,
Mhm.
and he he coaches Jamal, the student, to utilize some of his words to find his own. Same
Mhm.
concept applies to this technique,
Yeah.
and so I kind of wanted to share that with you as we continue this amazing interview. I really want to appreciate anyone who's watching these extended interviews on YouTube and stuff like that. I mean, the content is, you're not going to find this content anywhere else in the world. These interviews at length, and this raw passion, this raw authenticity that it just doesn't really exist anywhere else that I know of. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see the authenticity like this anywhere else. Um,
Yeah.
so, as far as everything else is concerned, and as we wrap up our interview for the International Euphonium Summit, at least part one, if not two, maybe down the road here, because I really would love to see where your career takes flight,
Yeah.
uh, and uh, how this is a stepping stone in your journey forward. How would you? But there's so many ways to go on wrapping this up, and I want to provide the most value I can with our student artists, families, and such like that. So why don't we go with this? Any final thoughts or principles that we haven't really covered? Uh, and there's been some that you've laid out that have created some tremendous impact on your life, especially uh, with with Norm Logan,
Yeah.
and I mean even with your professor Dr. Ken
Ken Crushy
Crashy,
and yeah.
and yeah, your theory teacher. Uh, what other would you what other principle, saying, or thought that you could leave us with in regards to maybe practicing or performing or daily life?
Yeah. I think for me, more of a daily life thing is in addition to, always striving to be kind and patient and welcoming to others, be kind and patient with yourself. I have a lot of students who get so easy frustrated with themselves, whether it's, they're playing, their grades, all that, but it's like, going back to not just practicing the practice and repeating it over and over and getting frustrated, take some time off the horn in your practice sessions to really think about things and calm yourself down. It's music is hard. Being a musician is not easy. A lot of people like, oh, that must be the most fun job in the world. It is,
It is.
but it is not easy. And I know a lot of people, myself included, go into music in college thinking it's going to be just like playing in band all the time. There's a lot more to it, and be patient with yourself and others. Don't feel like you're alone. Reach out for help if you need it, and then with practicing, be consistent with it. My students, I always make sure they're practicing consistently throughout the week and not just like hitting band stuff, running through it and leaving it. Have a daily routine. um my teachers have always told me, most of your practice should be your daily routine, like your fundamentals. It shouldn't be mostly, running through your solos and band stuff. I mean, yes, work on it, but to get really better at your instrument, you got to really have solid fundamentals and put in the time to and keep putting in the time. It's a lifelong thing, right? Um, you don't just stop playing low range once you get good at it. You got to keep doing it. Yeah, so consistent practice is key in my mind, and then just being patient with yourself and reaching out when you need it.
That's perfect. Wow. What a great wrap up to this recorded version. This part one of many, many more interactions that we'll have with Dr. Ian Lester here on the International Euphonium Summit. Uh,
Yeah.
for the first one, 2023, wow, what a gem. What amazing time. Thank you so much for being willing and taking the initiative and saying yes to booking your time to record, to share your vulnerability, your weaknesses, and your just your processes of how you approach life and music in general.
Yeah, of course. I mean, thank you for having me. Everyone watching and listening, like you said, this is a gem of a resource. Even not even just my interview, but all the other interviews. I really hope people get the most out of them, because I'm sure there's so much stuff in these other interviews that are so worthwhile for these, people to hear. So yeah, take
It's
advantage of this resource.
it's amazing. I can't wait to see what impact your and talking to those that are watching now and will watch in the future. I am specifically looking for your impact that you've had with Dr. Enlister's his vulnerability, his practice, where he's going to go. If you're a current student of him, watching down the road, many, many years to come, or have been impacted him with just this talk, or in your practice, or as we covered at the beginning of this interview, himself saying that he really hasn't connected back with Norm Logan and reaching out and saying what an impact he made. Leave that impact here. Let us know what impact that Dr. Ian Lester has had on your life with what he brought to the table here, or what he's brought to you in past lessons at the camps that he's taught at, or at the university he's going to work at eventually, or as a doctoral candidate over at UMKC when Tom Stein had left for that one day being sick. Um, I This is for y'all. This isn't for me. This isn't for him. This is sharing our journey, our walk, our struggles, our journey that we had, so you don't have to. Or if you're going through right now, that you can say, "Wow, okay, yes, I can do this." Wow, someone else has had that same struggle or has gone through, and make that connection. See that. Or if you know your loved one that's struggling through this, even as a hobbyist, hobby euphonium player, hobby musician, or any station in life, is yeah, these times come that you're gonna want to quit, that you're gonna want to stop because you don't feel worthy enough, or you you we're our own worst critics.
Yeah.
And as a musician, that's not any easier. Actually, it's exponentially harder in a lot of cases. And you heard it from Dr. Ian Lester. Reach out, connect with someone, connect with if you're at the college level and you can be a part of the honorary fraternities like Kappa Kappa Psi, Symphonia, Tau Beta Sigma, or any of those resources, even at a high school level or middle school level, those in those organizations around campuses across the U.S., if not the globe. I don't know if we have any global brothers and sisters that way or uh, thereabouts. They're here to help y'all. We're here to mentor anyone who's willing to just ask for help. We don't know if you need help unless you ask.
Yeah, and I myself am an alumni of Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia. Some of
Perfect.
my closest friends, still to this day, are from there. Like Nicholas was saying, great resource. But also, like, not everyone has supportive family. The people at the university faculty, um, everyone there is there for you to succeed.
Mhm.
They want you to succeed. Reach out to faculty. If you do have supportive family, of course, reach out to family, but there are so many more resources than just family that I think are valuable to you as a student.
And if you're in that moment in your struggle or in your journey right now, and you're seeing this as a uh, kind of a last ditch effort, um, there's always someone watching. There's always someone who's willing to answer that call or be that person. Uh, right? Say, you know, message someone that's been a part of this International Euphonium Summit. We've all been there. We know the
Yeah, I mean,
struggle. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anyone out there who would want to shoot me an email, just because I've been through a lot, because anyone's been through something similar, shoot me an email. I am more than happy to, listen if anything, and just
And
be
we'll
there
put
for you.
the links to all his stuff below
Yeah.
or somewhere along the lines of these incredible resources you have as a family member. Sometimes as a parent, we can't speak to our student artists like someone else can because frankly we apparently don't know it all and don't know what our students going through, but someone else can bridge that gap, just like us bringing Dr. Ian Lesser on and showcasing his journey and struggles. There's always a way. Uh,
Yep.
Take that initiative, reach out, or however this needs to happen. We're here for y'all, uh, specifically for y'all to succeed in this life. And no matter what, it's worth driving on and giving this life all you have, even when it sucks. To be honest, it's got there's gonna be times,
Hmm.
and I hope, yeah, I'll just leave it at that before I start welling up, because it's really important.
It is.
So yeah, thank you for sticking with this interview and this conversation, and so many other interviews. They're really great conversations.
Yeah.
Dive into all these. Reach out, be a part of these. Uh, if you want to be interviewed, because you have a story to tell yourself, and maybe not for this International Euphonium Summit, but maybe for another summit down the road, or share your story, or get on a Facebook Live or Zoom Live or whatever social internet or media, or just record yourself on a video and upload it to whatever platform there may be at your time that you watch this. Let people know. Be vulnerable. Take initiative. Be the first. If there's no one else, be the first. Create your blue ocean. And that's where I wanted to get back to, is create your blue ocean, just like Dr. Ian Lesser was getting at with finding your special niche and focus on making yourself stand out when everyone seems to be a Waldo.
Yep.
If anybody understands that term now, uh, where's Waldo?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you, Dr. Ian Lester, for being part of this and sharing your journey. Everyone, thank you so much. Have a great day and serve well. And we'll see you for the next interview and the next version. Take care, y'all.